Hi, I'm Steve Jackson, and I'm a Lego fan. I want to thank the BrickCon staff for making this happen, and thanks to all of you for coming. And someday I will make it to a live BrickCon. I love Seattle, and visiting and then getting to play with bricks would just be right over the top. Uh, my first AFOL love was pirates, but these days I focus on town and train with the side order of Great Ball Contraption. I'm an active member of Slug Austin, the general interest club that puts on Brick Fiesta, and the Texas Brick Railroad, a Lego train club, and I live outside Austin, Texas. Today I'm going to talk about long distance collaboration, and props to Amy Meyer, who is one of our TVGs here, for suggesting that subject in the first place. And thanks also to Ali and Deneen, who are keeping the electrons moving while we do our talk. I will take questions at the end, but in a live presentation, I would also take relevant questions during the talk. So if you preface something in chat with question in all caps, the TVGs will see it. And if it seems like something that should be passed on right then, they will. Okay, down to business. In its 7 years, the Texas Brick Railroad has built a reputation for creating large, detailed, collaborative layouts at train and Lego events. They are never the same twice. We won the 2020 Brick Train Award for best layout in the Americas, and I'm recognizing here the wonderful work of the World Prize winner, the Melbourne Lego Train Club. You can see the TBRR website at www.texasbrickrr.com. If you're into multitasking, feel free to browse it while we talk. Anyway, we do what we do without any face-to-face meetings except at the actual shows, because Texas is just too darn big. Half our core group is in Austin, half is in Houston. That's 3 hours from the near side of one to the near side of the other. And our members are scattered through the state and beyond, so we only meet at shows. We arrive, we set up the table, we build a layout that none of us has ever seen before. And when the doors open, it's ready and it runs and it's great. How do we pull this off? Here's a picture. This is my living room, but this is the general look of our layouts. We are heavy into trees, heavy into both the mock and modular buildings, and we run the trains. I don't have a monorail up on that yet, but that'll happen. So to start off, you cannot collaborate long distance unless you can collaborate, period. So first I want to talk about some techniques for successful cooperation. Once we can walk, we will start to run, and I'll go into the ways that we make this work without face-to-face meetings and dress rehearsal setups. Okay, collaboration techniques. The commonest sort of collaborative display is the kind we do, town and train, but there are lots of others. You can do Apocalypse Town with some help from Brick Arms. At Brick World a couple of years ago, I really enjoyed seeing the Heart Lake City Apocalypse Town. You can do Pirate Bays and Pirate Battles. You can do Star Wars and Harry Potter scenes, or both together. I've seen some good Ninjago collaborations, and Harry Potter Ninjago won an award this weekend. You can do space scenes with ships from many builders. You can do Micropolis. Shout out here to Zonker Harris. He did a great talk last night, and he's been using good collab techniques with the West Coast lugs. And of course, Great Ball Contraption. And for those of you who don't know about it, an important collaborative tool for GBC people everywhere is the Great Ball Pit Discord server. If you didn't know about it, you do now. Hunt it down. That's Great Ball Pit, one word. And so on, because anytime you have more than one person interested in a theme, you have a possible collaboration. Now, why should you do a collaboration at all? In the first place, strength in numbers. One pirate ship isn't much of a sea battle. 6 pirate ships is getting someplace. 20 pirate ships, now we're into awesome territory. You may find complementary talents or collections. One of you may be a real master of tricky builds. One has the eye of an artist. One has monorail. One has the mystic power to find anything in the world on BrickLink, whatever. You combine your skills and it gets better. But the biggest reason is just because you like to hang out and work together. The first thing you need for a successful collab is people. People who want to cooperate and who will put the interest of the show ahead of their own personal ego in any one build. TBRR has been very fortunate in this respect, but we all know great builders who will never be collaborators because everything has to be about them. And I'm not afraid of offending anyone here because those folks are not in a talk about collaboration in the first place. Some general things for any collaboration: make sure everything physically fits. This is less important if you can just lay things down on a table, like spaceships. But for Micropolis, it's vital that everything fit precisely. For our own club layouts, everything is in a multiple of 8 studs wide. Here's a picture of a modular building that's only 8 studs wide. This was fun to do. We have planning tools, and I will get to those later. Very important. Put your names on things and put your names on the boxes that you bring your things in. This will save you lots and lots of craziness, especially on breakdown. The minifigs, the trees, things like that can't really be tagged. So for our club, we just divide the layout into physical sections, and each person does all of the little stuff for their own section. Okay, here's a big one. Spread out the load. Do not put too much responsibility on any one person. It's not good for that person, and it's not good for the project. You need mutual trust and respect. You need the understanding that everyone can do a part. You will have to have people in leadership positions. It's very good if they can name backups. I had to back out once of a leadership role the day before a convention. My house flooded. The club carried on. You want to have appropriate standards and you want to be perfectionists, but within reason. And when you're a perfectionist, be helpful and kind about perfectionism. Show people how they can do better. We are constantly challenging each other to up our game. Several years ago, when we were getting the club off the ground, I built ballasted, decorated, double mainline curves, and they were just the wonder of the club. Now they're the small stuff. There are good third-party track sections available in wider radii, and my old R40 curves are rarely needed. So the guys are after me to tear them down and upgrade, and I'm working on it. There's an R40 curve at the inside and a BrickTrax R56 being laid down at the top. And you can see, you can't see me pointing, you can see where the greenery has been cleared away. That is where the R40 track used to be. It actually comes out wider. Now, at the same time that we pick on each other to do better, this is important too, we are a mutual admiration society. You should be encouraging to everyone. And this is a very important point. Don't just encourage the newbies. You have to do that, yes, but master builders need love too. When somebody who has been awesome for 10 years creates their latest awesome thing, don't take it for granted. Tell them so. Anyhow, standards. We have standards, but we don't want more standards than necessary because too often a standard, not just in Lego, but in anything, a standard can be a way for an in-group to claim that everybody else is doing it wrong. There is no wrong in Lego except for Mega Bloks and Crazy Glue. But a collaboration needs to agree on a few points ahead of time. Our railroad club uses the pin lug ballast profile with black ties. That way the track is uniform throughout the layout, which ties it all together, so to speak. We do our best to keep the city streets consistent, at least along a given street. But which exact street style we use depends on whose collection of streets is coming out. And that depends on how many streets we need. We do expect all street surfaces to be tiled. Everything we do is built on either a base plate or a tile. Some of our members are enthusiastic about more complex basing systems like the MILS, and some of us hate it. So there is no consensus, and we don't do things without consensus. There are also important places where we do not enforce a standard, and this is something that you should think about. We mostly still use power functions, but we don't insist on it. Some of us are experimenting with the newfangled powered up stuff, and I want to say that the powered up presentation a couple of hours ago gave me hope about its becoming more useful at big shows with some of the things that they're adding. One of our members has scratch built his own RC remote controller. There is no reason these things can't coexist. We are agnostic about train width. If you're not into trains, this next part is going to go right over your head, and ignore it. But trains can be built any size. There's no right width. We admit that 8 wide is the most consistent with minifig height, but it's not always achievable. Official Lego kits come out 6 wide or 7 wide, depending on how you count. And some of those are beautiful and look good on the table. People have brought 10 wide trains. Those tend to scrape the scenery off curves, but my, they look nice. We love our scenery. We love trees. We don't have an official club tree, and we're not going to. Everyone should come up with their own designs. In Texas, forests have lots of kinds of trees. They have lots of kinds of brush. They have lots of pathetic scrub, and they have lots of vicious cactus. So in our layouts, we vary not just color, but also the height and the style of vegetation. Our trees get a lot of comments, and we love it. The question is, are these major points written down somewhere? They are, and I will talk with the TVGs about what's a good way to present them where you can find them. We also have the question, how many participants collaborate in a show? Usually 10 to a dozen, of whom maybe 5 or 6 will be building major parts, a couple will be building smaller parts, and some will be coming to help, which is valuable, especially on breakdown. More, you can't have too many hands. We've never had too many hands on a breakdown. Okay, some display notes on specifically for Town Train. Know your audience. The things that we showcase at a model train show are not the same ones that we showcase at an AFOL meet or a maker fair. Know where your audience is going to be standing. It's easier to do a layout if it will be seen from only 2 sides, but working in the round is really a fun challenge. Among other things, working in the round means that all kit modulars should be modded so they have windows and features on all sides, because out of the box, they usually have flat backs. We have a variety of solutions for that, including put trees behind it. It just depends on whether we've had time to work on it. Okay, not just for trains now. Remember motion, remember lighting, remember to have a provision for the kids who will make up a lot of your audience, especially at train and museum shows. Don't put things so high that they can't see them. Be friendly to the adults who want to pick up their kids to see things. A couple of times we have had stools for kids to stand on. There's a potential liability issue there. Thank you, 2020. But the kids love to look at the track. Make it possible. One thing that we have found, and this is a little bit risky, but sometimes we do it. Sometimes we work without stanchions and we don't build all the way to the edge of the table. That makes it possible for kids of a certain height to come lean on the edge of the table and they can see better. And, it's about the kids. Okay, now let's get into some actual distant collaborative techniques, since that was supposed to be our title. This is a good place to add that we are doing all this without any bylaws or any legal organization. We are just a loose affiliation of fans. Some of our members would like to have more bylaws and so on. Some of them are opposed to it. There's no consensus, so there's no action. We work just fine as an informal grouping. But for a show, we have two key documents. We have a pre-show layout, and we have a post-show report, which we post online. If you're looking at our website, you're probably seeing some post-show reports. These are a chance to brag to each other about what we did, but it's also a chance to talk about what we could do better next time. Okay, back to setup. You've got to set up quickly when you display at a show. You are lucky if you have 24 hours of setup time. More likely, you're going to have maybe 8 hours the day before and then a couple of hours in the early morning. This is one of the metrics that we keep close track of and always try to do better, since we are building something that none of us has ever seen. We like to know how many AFOL hours were actually spent on building a given layout, and how many at the end did it take to get it safely down and repacked. This gives us an idea of what we can take on in the future, because between us, we have more stuff now than we can show. There's a show coming up in Killeen that, if COVID doesn't cancel it, has promised us all the space we want, no matter how much that is. Well, we'll take them up on that. But if we're invited to a show and we find out that we have only 3 people who can make it, we know not to plan too big a layout. And that's true even if those 3 people have a lot of stuff, because they still have only 60 minutes per hour, just like all those clocks on the ballast, 60 minutes per hour. And related to that, honor the helpers. That's very important. That's important whatever your theme is. We have several members who love doing shows for the public, but they don't have a lot of trained stuff themselves, and that is all right. They come and they contribute their time and their help and their feedback, and that is more precious than any single mock. I would give up any mock that I have for one more regular member. I don't have to make that trade, but I would. A distributed club in particular needs this kind of help very much. And sometimes they graduate. I'm thinking in particular of one AFOL who started off by coming to watch and learn. He didn't say much, but he asked good questions. He's now building incredible mocks. He's now our club ambassador. Hi, Ed. One thing that anybody could do, we have the mock box. This is a literal, physical little box to which each of us has contributed several small mocks that can go onto a layout. If someone can't make it to a show, through the mock box, they can still participate. And it's fun. There's some nice stuff in there. Okay, distant techniques again. You always want to designate a showrunner. Somebody has to be in charge of planning and communication. And your communication has to be massive and constant. Our official presence is on Google Groups. We open a thread there for each show that we're going to do. The showrunner usually does layout design and will post layouts there. Then everyone comments. We also have the website that I told you about, but that is more public facing in intent. We also have a Discord group, but that isn't being used very much. That's just for chat. It's a part of the TextLug Discord cluster. What do we do for planning tools? Proposed layouts are rendered in BlueBrick, which is a program designed by Alban Nantes for doing train layouts. Sometimes we use my own planning tool, which is a set of quarter scale Lego tiles that represent my own collection and the notable buildings of other club members. And I wish I had taken a picture of that, but I don't have one to show. Note to self, put in a picture of the quarter scale next time. It's not literal quarter scales of the buildings like the mini modulars. The detail on these is compressed vertically because when I plan a layout with it, I'm looking at the tops of the buildings. So it's important to me to be able to recognize them from the top. Not so important to know what's on the sides. Then we really start micromanaging. We decide what will go onto the layout. First thing you have to know, find out who is a definite for the show, who is a probable. This gets back to the trust issue. If someone tells us they can be there with 50 feet of track, we have to know they'll be there with 50 feet of track. Otherwise, trains will be running on the table for 50 feet. Never had that. Then we decide how many tables we're going to fill. The show will assign us space. We don't have to fill it all with tables. If we don't have enough people to fill it all with tables, we won't try. There are other very interesting things that you can do with a little bit of space. And we always want to make sure that our surround is fully accessible. That eats space. That's just the way it goes. That's necessary. Related to that, we decide whether or not to use stanchions. We have some wonderful stanchions that we built based on something great that we saw at a traditional railroad show, but we don't always use them. Most people are very polite. We do sometimes have audience-caused derailments. More of those are caused by adults than by children. The most typical adult-caused derailment is somebody leaning over the layout to take a picture, and a train comes from the direction they're not expecting and baps them. So when we see somebody leaning like that, that's a danger sign right there. Just ask them nicely to watch out for the trains. The next thing in setting your layout is decide if something is going to be the centerpiece. If there's a dramatic new mock that we want to showcase, well, we make sure that that's front and center stage. We are always exchanging photos of new mocks. The important thing with a new mock is to make sure that everybody really knows what size it is. Again, if you're building base plate to base plate, that's a killer. If your pirate ship is just a little bit bigger than expected, that's probably no problem because you're setting it there on your tablecloth ocean. Then you choose the rest of the buildings. And again, that depends on the show you're going to. If we were setting up at BrickCon, then mocks would be very much preferred to sets. because you folks have seen the sets. Mods, maybe. Straight built sets, not unless we have to resort to filler. But for a trained audience, a train show, sets are no problem at all, even if a train fan is familiar with the whole Lego modular line. Traditional scale builders are used to building their layouts from sets. Only the most advanced fans scratch build their own buildings at all, and they will not think the less of you for using a set, as long as you've properly put it together. Then we think, what else needs a boost because it's showy? Anything lighted gets a boost. Anything with motion gets a big boost. Audiences love these things. Gareth Ellis lighted and motorized the big Ferris wheel, and that thing just hypnotizes the crowds. This is my own new mock here. It only has motion if you blow on the pendulum, but it does have lighting both inside and outside. The pendulum is at the base. Yeah, that's supposed to be a little Foucault pendulum, and it's hanging on an actual white string, so you can make it move. But that's going to be Illuminati headquarters as soon as I get a proper sticker for it, because everyone told me it was evil. It's very important, if sets are used in the layout, and at train shows they are, avoid duplication except for sets that gain by duplication, like the brownstone. If you have a lot of people who want to build brownstones, that's fine. Have a row of brownstones. Maybe put a street between them, because that's the way brownstones come. And once you've decided what, you decide what goes where. And there will be a lot of back and forth communication. The easy way is to divide the whole layout into sectors and assign each participant a sector. We don't do that anymore. Nowadays, one of my buildings might sit between one of Tony Sava's and one of Ed's. That gives us a lot more flexibility to position everything for good sight lines. It keeps everything fresh. It requires a little bit more planning, but we're planning anyway. We might as well try to get it all right. And we leave lots of space for trees because trees are a signature for our club. But again, remember the sight lines. Don't block sight lines unless you're creating drama. It's very cool to have a train come out from behind the trees. It's not so cool if you can't see the train at all because the trees are in the way. In the last hours before you open, walk around the layout and look for things like that, because that's one of the places where distance collaboration doesn't make up for being on the site. Something that we think is important, and with different collaborations this will be less important, but in a town train layout, we really like to give the feel of a real town rather than just a collection of buildings. For instance, there's always at least one plaza or park, because a real town planner would have green space. We put in sidewalks. Lego has been nice enough to provide us sidewalks on modular sets. We think sidewalks are good. If our show includes a carnival, which it doesn't always, but carnival buildings move and are lighted and are great, we keep them together. There's a carnival in town. We don't have a carnival next to an office building next to an apartment. I personally don't like to put the pet shop next to an apartment because I wouldn't want to live right next to the pet shop. But that's just me. Don't forget the trains. I've talked about everything but trains, it seems. We use both working track for motion and sidings to display extra equipment, depending on whether a monorail fan can come. Monorail can also make an appearance. We have one builder who has created a custom lighted monorail, and it's beautiful. Sob. Okay, back to collaboration. Timing is very important. You have to plan that well in advance, especially if you're coming from 3 or more hours away. Nothing can happen until the tables are on site. If you're using the venue tables, that's great, but we know from experience that some venues do not have great tables. We have club tables, we bring them, but they have to be there first. Other things can arrive later. Once we're on site, be flexible and plan for that flexibility in advance. We bring a lot of extra landscaped green base plates that can fill a large amount of space attractively if someone has a last minute emergency. The commonest problem is that the venue space is not what we were told it was. And it makes you quite crazy to plan in advance and then find out that you don't get what you were told you get. Sometimes that's because the venue was sloppy. More often it's because the fire marshal changed it. And usually we lose space, but sometimes the show asks if we can fill extra space. And we're happy to. We have all these base plates. There's no use getting excited about these things. Whatever they say, smile and meet the challenge like it was routine, because after you go to enough shows, it is. Just adapt on the fly and have fun. And when the show opens, it will all look like it was planned that way from the start. Okay. We have a question about the mock box. I'll take that now. Is that filler mock? Yes. Or a box for AFOLs to send a mock to shows they can't attend? Yes. Yes, indeed. It's both, and both are good. We don't normally need filler that desperately, but when we do, it's nice to have it, and it's nice to be good filler. And we had a question about the building. Are those glitter blocks? Yes, that's glitter purple. Those are glitter purple 1x4s. I accumulated those for 10 years. Then I built my building. Something that I think is important in any club, but especially in a club that's distributed, decisions have to be distributed. Everyone's input is important, and we ask over and over again, how does everyone feel about this one? The showrunner prepares the final layout after everyone has had input. We print out color hard copies and take them with us. This is an important technique. It would be, I think, especially handy for Micropolis. It would be handy if you're building a Hogwarts. Less so if you're putting down spaceships or pirate ships. But we have the color copies with us. We refer to them during setup. Our layouts are just too big and complex to keep track of in our head, and we don't have time to tear down and start over. Since we have more than a half dozen core members, about a dozen who are occasionally active, and a lot of friends who show up once in a while, the collection is always changing. No two shows are ever the same, even if they're in the identical space. Train show fans like this in particular, because most train club layouts don't change much from year to year. The ones that do are awesome, but a lot don't. And train show fans appreciate a display that's always being updated, rearranged, and cleaned off a little bit. And now I guess I'm ready for questions. Yes, that's something. Among the club members, we built about a half dozen copies of the Brick Model Railroader Challenger boxcar. We're making sure that they all have different numbers on them, and we look forward to displaying the string at Brick Fiesta. Yes, that's what's in my boxcars, lots and lots of munchkin. Question, can I show a plan? No. The next time I present this, I will know to have one ready. The blue brick plans look very much like blue brick plans. They're just kind of big. The question Brickworm asks, did we learn by trial and error or did they come from some other source? Mostly by trial and error, which is one reason that I was enthusiastic about doing this talk. Let's spread this knowledge. Do we publish a standards list? No. Do you think we should? We have so few solid standards and so many this is optional. But I can see the point of publishing them both. Okay, Bill Ward asks, do we use mills? No, we do not. Some of us like the idea of mills, some of us don't, and are trying to think of other ways to get the benefit of mills without spending the money or raising the layout. Since we don't have a consensus, we don't do it. Question was asked, what are mills? Oh, somebody tell me what mill stands for. The S is standard and the L is Lego. It stands for much expensive Legos. No, it doesn't stand for much expensive Lego standard. Maybe somebody will tell us. Modular integrated landscaping standard is where that came from. I'm not a fan, some are. It's an attempt to solve a problem, and I'm all in favor of attempts to solve problems. Okay, how long have you been building? The club is 7 years old. I started one of my old sets that I still have is 001, if that gives you an idea. I did go through the Dark Ages, but I didn't get rid of 001. I still have a few things that I built when I was little. I got really active 10 or 12 years ago. Oh, you're asking an AFOL if he will talk about his mock. Yes. It's 4 stories high. It is built on an irregular quadrilateral. The base is a long rectangle plus a triangle, which started out Pythagorean but got modified. That's roughly the profile of the building. It overlaps a lot. Yes, that's a pterodactyl on the side because it's an evil building. On the bottom is the non-purist part. The attachment for the lighting system is purist, done with a couple of long axles and a couple of universal joints in order to follow the profile. But the lighting itself is third-party LED lights wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped around the axle, going to a battery box that is fastened inside. So it's much easier to light it up than some of the ones that I've built. See all the little lights.
Very nice.
And moving the whole building in front of the screen would be a challenge. Moving the screen to the building would just show you what you've already seen. So I think I won't do that. There's another little subsidiary light on the top, and I really cheated for that. This is a little compartment at the top. And inside it, to provide steady light, is one of these little 50-cent Amazon candle lights. So I turn it on and drop it in here, and it lights through the brick, which gives a different quality of color than the fairy lights, which light from outside the brick and show off the sparkles. If I lit the whole building from inside, it would just look trans-purple. It wouldn't look sparkly. Brickworm asks, how do we handle storage of club tables? Some of our members have both space and big enough vehicles to carry them, and they graciously volunteer their services. Our club tables uh, are a design that break down fairly small. They're 3 base plates by 5 base plates. I can't quite get them in my car, but anybody with an SUV can carry them. Do we use custom built tables? Yes, we do. That's another thing that we should put the plan on our website, and I don't believe it is. So maybe maybe someday, maybe someday soon. I see it looks like Zonker is asking how the pendulum triggers the lights. It does not, but that's a good idea. No, the pendulum just moves if somebody blows on it. How would you make the pendulum trigger the lights? You'd either need to have a Mindstorms thing with good vision inside the building and a little hole, or you'd need to run a cable where people could see it, or you could have a magnet in the pendulum base. You could do it a lot of ways if you were good. A Hall effect sensor under the tiles, yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I
Thank
had
you,
fun.
Steve. This is really, really informative.